Hello everyone, I am Mr. Brian. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment, letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's case. I had never thought much about smart homes. The idea of my devices talking to each other, sharing data, was just a convenience, not something worth losing sleep over. I worked from home. It's support for some nondescript tech company, the kind that paid just well enough for me to be comfortable, but not enough to make life feel exciting. At 32, I had a routine. Wake up, work, eat, sleep. It was a life built for safety, for control, and I didn't realize how fragile that was until the night everything changed. It was 3 a.m. when I first noticed something off. The silence of the house was unnerving. The hum of the refrigerator, the subtle buzz of my computer running in the background. These things usually comforted me, but tonight, the hum seemed louder, more pronounced, like it was growing closer. I tried to ignore it, rolling over in bed, staring at the dark ceiling. Then I saw it. The lights in my living room blinked. 1, 2, 3. It was quick, then stopped. I couldn't make sense of it. Maybe a power surge. The last thing I needed was to deal with a malfunctioning smart system, but I wasn't in the mood for troubleshooting. I let it go, hoping it would stay quiet. But then it happened again. The lights blinked, then they flickered, and something more alarming came into view. A pattern. It was like the bulbs were trying to communicate with me. Morse code. HELP. I froze. The room felt colder, despite the warmth of my blanket. Was this a prank? A glitch in the system? Or something worse? My heart raced as I grabbed my phone, pulling up the smart home app. Everything seemed normal, nothing out of place. Yet the lights, my lights, were still blinking in that strange, deliberate sequence. It wasn't a glitch. Someone was controlling them. Someone knew I was awake. Someone was watching. I scanned my devices, checking for unfamiliar connections. That's when I found it. An unsecured network from the house next door. You are next. The name made my stomach twist. It wasn't just an intrusion, it was a warning. I didn't know who this person was, but I had a sinking feeling they knew exactly who I was and exactly what I was doing. I should have called the police, but my mind was still racing. My fingers hovered over the phone, but I couldn't bring myself to dial. What would I even say? That some stranger had hijacked my lights in the middle of the night? It would sound insane. Besides, I didn't have any concrete evidence. Just a hunch, a feeling gnawing at me, and that horrifyingly ominous network name. But that's all it took. Just a little push for the fear to spiral out of control. I glanced at the clock. 3:23 a.m. I hadn't gotten any sleep since the lights started their silent plea for help. My thoughts were clouded by paranoia. If someone was watching me, what had they seen? Did they know I was still awake? Were they tracking my every movement, my every breath? I needed to figure this out. As an IT worker, I knew how easy it could be to exploit vulnerabilities in smart devices. I wasn't stupid enough to ignore that possibility. But this felt different. It wasn't just a hack. It was personal. Whoever was doing this was toying with me, enjoying the fear they were creating. I opened my laptop and began running a security scan, checking my devices for anything unusual. But as I sat there, the weight of my isolation pressed down on me. The house was so quiet, too quiet. I hadn't realized how much I relied on the ambient noise of life until it was gone. The scan completed with no results, which was both a relief and a curse. Nothing on the surface, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was hiding in the shadows. My laptop screen flickered once, then went dark. I slammed my hand on the keyboard, frustrated, and the light above my desk blinked again, just like before, that same pattern, HELP. I jumped back from the desk, the room suddenly spinning with dread. The words seemed to pierce through the silence, echoing in my ears. Someone was in my house. Someone was using my smart system to send me a message. And the only thing that stopped me from screaming was the fear that it might be exactly what they wanted. Someone was planning to hurt me. A sharp ringing cut through the air. My phone. I answered without looking at the screen. Hello? There was no voice, just heavy breathing. I slammed the phone down, adrenaline coursing through my veins. Was it the hacker? Or was it something worse? I sat in the dark, my phone still vibrating on the table, but I couldn't bring myself to pick it up again. My heart was racing so fast, I could almost hear it over the hum of the refrigerator. The silence had returned, but it wasn't comforting. It was oppressive. I felt like I was being watched from every angle, even though I couldn't see anything. My smart lights blinked again, the same Morse code. Help. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through my phone's contacts. I needed help, but who could I trust? The idea of calling the police seemed laughable. How could I explain this? I tried to calm myself, going over the facts. It was 3:30 a.m., and everything seemed to be connected to the strange network Warnext, but I couldn't understand why anyone would target me. I wasn't anyone important. I was just an ordinary IT worker, no enemies, no secret life, and yet my entire world had been turned upside down by a few blinking lights and a cryptic message. I pulled up the list of devices connected to my network, nothing out of place. But what if the hacker had access to more than just my devices? What if they had access to my cameras? My thoughts raced, each one more terrifying than the last. I tried to shake the paranoia, but it only grew worse. I grabbed my phone again, checking the app for my security cameras. The feed from the front door was blurry. No, it wasn't blurry. There was something wrong with it, like it was being manipulated. Then I saw something. Movement. A shadow passed in front of the camera. My heart stopped. I hadn't heard anything. There was no sound, no sign that anyone was outside. But I saw it clearly. A figure standing still just outside my front door. I bolted upright, my pulse pounding in my ears. Who was it? Was it the hacker? Or had someone been watching me for days, weeks, months even, waiting for the right moment? I couldn't breathe. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, suffocating me. I grabbed my phone and tried to call the police, but the call wouldn't go through. The figure outside the door moved again, this time closer to the window, and then I saw the reflection in the glass. Another figure standing right behind me. I spun around, but no one was there. The room was empty. I couldn't breathe. I checked the camera feed again, but the shadow was gone. The figure at the window had vanished, and now all that was left was the faint reflection of my own face, pale and trembling. My mind spun with confusion, disbelief, and fear. Was I losing my grip on reality? Was I imagining things? The rational part of me screamed that it was impossible, but the visceral panic in my chest told me otherwise. Someone had been in my house, someone who knew exactly how to make me feel like I was losing control. I stood there, staring at the empty window, the silence pressing in on me like a vice. My eyes darted from corner to corner of the room, looking for anything out of place, but nothing was. Everything was exactly as it had been before. When life had felt normal, I felt ridiculous. I wasn't some damsel in distress. I was Carla, and a professional. I knew how to defend myself in this world of code and networks. But this was beyond me. The feeling of being hunted, of someone watching me from the darkness, was a terror I couldn't combat with lines of code. I tried to take control again. I opened my laptop, launching a deep scan of all connected devices. But something was wrong. My screen flickered, then went black. I slammed the laptop shut in frustration. The walls of my house felt like they were closing in, the silence now thick with the sound of my own panicked breathing. Then my phone buzzed again. Another message. But this time, it wasn't from a random number. It was from a contact I didn't recognize. The message read, "You're next." I froze. The words seemed to echo in my mind. Each letter, a hammer strike against the fragile barrier of my sanity. I quickly ran a reverse lookup on the number, but it came back as private. My phone buzzed once more. Another message. "You're not the first, Carla, just the next." I didn't need to be a genius to know what that meant. Someone was watching me, someone who had been doing this for a long time, and I had become the next target in their twisted game. I needed to do something. I couldn't wait for the police to figure this out. I wasn't sure how much time I had left. I needed to find out who was behind this, and I needed to do it fast. I paced back and forth across my living room, my mind racing. The phone messages kept running through my head, the same sickening words replaying over and over. "You're next." It wasn't just a threat anymore. It was a countdown. I felt like I was being hunted, and the only question left was whether or not I could outsmart the hunter. It was a chilling thought. I had to act. But what could I do? How could I stop someone who knew how to control my own devices? I glanced at my laptop, still sitting on the table, dark and silent. It had been hours since I last tried to access the system, and yet the hacker was still out there, playing his twisted game. That's when it hit me. What if the hacker wasn't just watching my home? What if he was watching me? Not just in the physical sense, but from within my devices. The thought made my stomach churn, but I couldn't ignore it. He had been controlling the lights, my cameras, and even my phone. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. He had to be watching me in real time, using my own devices against me. I had to get him out of my network, disconnect everything. I needed to regain control, fast. I pulled out a screwdriver and started disconnecting every smart device in the house. My speakers, my thermostat, my lights. As I worked, I kept my eyes on the front door. The feeling of being watched had never left, and I was sure the shadows outside were still lurking. My hands were shaking as I tore through the cables, unplugging each device one by one. The longer I stayed in this house, the more paranoid I became. The walls felt like they were pressing in on me. When I finally disconnected the last device, I slumped against the wall. I felt a strange sense of relief, but it was short-lived. I knew the hacker wasn't going to give up that easily. He wasn't just interested in my lights or my thermostat. He wanted me. He wanted to see how far he could push me before I broke. I wasn't sure how I knew this, but the feeling settled deep in my bones, like a truth I couldn't ignore. I opened my laptop again, hoping I had enough time to track the hacker's IP address. I was familiar with how these things worked, and I had the tools to find him. But as the laptop screen lit up, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The system had rebooted itself, and in the corner of the screen, under my connected devices, there was a new name, War Next. It was a chilling reminder that I wasn't in control anymore. Whoever was behind this, whoever was playing this game, was still very much in the driver's seat. I had to act quickly. The hacker wasn't just lurking in the background anymore. He was in my face, taunting me, letting me know that he was in control. I could feel his presence like a weight in the air, pressing down on me with every second that passed. My heart thudded in my chest, and my hands were slick with sweat as I tried to think through my options. Panic was the enemy. I had to stay calm. This wasn't just a break-in. It was a game, and I refused to be the prey. I quickly accessed the admin panel on my laptop, scanning the network for any sign of unusual activity. I traced the connected devices, but I already knew what I'd find. The hacker had used my own network against me, leaving behind only breadcrumbs of his actions. He had infected every part of my system, monitoring my every move. The thought made my skin crawl. I couldn't let him keep doing this. I had to take the fight to him. There was a moment of clarity, a sudden rush of cold calculation. I was an IT professional. I knew how to fight back. I might be alone in this house, but I had one advantage: my skills. The hacker had underestimated me, assuming I was just another target to torment. But what he didn't realize was that I wasn't just a victim. I was a threat. The darkness felt like a living thing, pressing against my skin, slipping into my lungs with every panicked breath. I sat in the dim glow of my laptop screen, staring at that name, War Next. It was more than just a network name now. It was a presence, a shadow that had crept into my home and was slowly suffocating me. I'd been awake for nearly 24 hours now, trapped in this nightmare of flashing lights and cryptic messages. My eyes burned with exhaustion, but sleep wasn't an option. Not when I knew someone was watching, waiting for me to let my guard down. I decided to try a different approach. If I couldn't disconnect the hacker from my network, maybe I could trace him, find out who he was, where he was operating from. It was risky, but I was running out of options. I launched a tracking program I'd developed for work, designed to identify and locate unauthorized network access. As the program loaded, I realized my hands were shaking. The cursor trembled across the screen as I input the commands. I was afraid, more afraid than I'd ever been in my life, but I couldn't let that stop me. The program began its work, scanning through layers of encrypted data, looking for the digital footprints the hacker had left behind. Minutes passed in tense silence, broken only by the soft clicking of keys and the occasional creak of the house settling around me. Then the program froze. The screen flickered, once, twice, and a message appeared. "Nice try, Carla, but you'll have to do better than that." My blood turned to ice. He knew what I was doing. He was watching me right now, reading my every move before I even made it. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart hammering against my ribs. This wasn't just some random hacker looking for thrills. This was someone who had targeted me specifically. Someone who knew my name, my routines, my capabilities. But why? What had I done to deserve this kind of attention? I thought back over the past few weeks, searching for anything unusual, any encounter that might have triggered this, but nothing stood out. My life had been painfully ordinary, a monotonous cycle of work and sleep, punctuated by occasional trips to the grocery store or the gym. I was nobody, just another face in the crowd, another IT support worker helping frustrated customers reset their passwords. So why me? Why now? A low hum broke through my thoughts. The refrigerator again, growing louder, more insistent. But this time, it wasn't just background noise. It was a warning. Something was wrong. I moved cautiously into the kitchen, my phone's flashlight cutting through the darkness. The refrigerator was vibrating slightly, the hum escalating into a high-pitched whine. As I approached, I noticed something on the digital display panel. Instead of the usual temperature readings, there was a message scrolling across the screen. "I see you, Carla. I've always seen you." I stumbled back, nearly dropping my phone. Every device in my home was compromised. Every screen, every display, every connection had become a window through which this stranger could peer into my life. I needed help. Real help. Not just from the police, who would likely dismiss this as a prank or a technical glitch. I needed someone who understood what was happening, someone who could help me fight back. I thought of my colleague, Devin, who worked in cybersecurity. He'd mentioned something about advanced home security vulnerabilities during our last team meeting. If anyone could make sense of this, it would be him. I reached for my phone, but stopped. If the hacker could access my refrigerator's display, they could certainly monitor my calls. I needed to be careful. I couldn't let them know I was reaching out for help. Instead, I grabbed my jacket and keys. I needed to get out of the house, away from the watchful eyes of my own technology. The idea of stepping outside, where that shadowy figure might be waiting, sent a wave of nausea through me. But staying here, surrounded by compromised devices, felt even more dangerous. I moved quietly to the front door, peering through the peephole. The street outside was empty, bathed in the sickly orange glow of streetlights. No shadowy figures, no lurking presence, just the ordinary stillness of a suburban neighborhood at 4 a.m. I took a deep breath and opened the door, half expecting an alarm to sound, a trap to spring. But nothing happened. The night air was cool against my face as I stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind me. My car sat in the driveway, a familiar silhouette in the darkness. I hurried toward it, keys clutched tightly in my hand. As I reached for the door handle, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A new message. "Where are you going, Carla? The fun is just beginning." I froze, the message glowing accusingly on my screen. He knew I was leaving. Somehow, he knew. I glanced around wildly, searching for cameras, for any sign of surveillance. There was nothing visible, but that didn't mean he wasn't watching. I got into my car anyway, locking the doors immediately. My hands were trembling so badly, I could barely get the key into the ignition. As the engine roared to life, the car's touchscreen display flickered, then went dark. When it came back on, it wasn't showing the usual navigation system. Instead, there was a video feed. My house, from the outside, with a clear view of the driveway, and standing just behind my car, barely visible in the shadows, was a figure, tall, broad-shouldered, face obscured by darkness. I whipped around, staring through the rear window, but there was no one there. The driveway was empty. I looked back at the screen, and the figure was still there, motionless, watching. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. The hacker was playing with me, using the car's display to show me false images, trying to escalate my fear. I put the car in reverse, determined to leave despite the unsettling images. As I backed out of the driveway, the display changed again. Now it showed a map, with a blinking dot representing my car, and alongside it, a message. "I'll always find you, Carla, no matter where you go." My stomach twisted with dread. He was tracking my car. The GPS system, the Bluetooth connection, the cellular data, all of it compromised, all of it turned against me. I pulled over to the side of the road, my mind racing. I couldn't use my car. I couldn't use my phone. I couldn't even trust my own home. I was isolated, cut off from help, exactly as the hacker wanted me to be. But I wasn't helpless. I still had my knowledge, my experience, and most importantly, I had something the hacker didn't expect: determination. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about fighting back, about refusing to be a victim in someone else's twisted game. I abandoned my car on the side of the road, taking only my wallet and keys. I would walk to the nearest gas station, use their phone to call Devin. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all I had. The streets were eerily quiet as I walked. The only sound, the rhythmic tapping of my footsteps on the pavement. Every rustle of leaves, every distant car engine made me jump. The darkness felt alive, watching, waiting for me to make a mistake. After about 20 minutes of walking, I saw the bright lights of a gas station in the distance. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by suspicion. What if the hacker was monitoring traffic cameras? What if he already knew where I was heading? I approached cautiously, scanning the parking lot for any sign of danger. There was only one car, presumably belonging to the attendant. The store itself was brightly lit, a beacon of normalcy in this nightmare. I entered, the electronic chime announcing my presence. The attendant, a bored-looking young man with headphones on, barely glanced up from his phone. I headed straight for the payphone in the corner, praying it still worked in this age of smartphones. To my relief, there was a dial tone. I punched in Devon's number, my fingers still trembling slightly. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. Then finally, a groggy voice. "Hello? Devon, it's Carla. I'm sorry to call so early, but I need your help. Something's happening, something bad." There was a pause, the sound of shuffling as Devon presumably sat up in bed. "Carla, what's going on? Are you okay?" I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. How could I possibly explain this without sounding completely unhinged? Someone's hacked into my home network. They're controlling my devices, sending me messages. I think they're watching me through my cameras. Another pause. I could almost see Devon's frown, the way his forehead would crease with concern. "That's serious. Have you called the police?" "No, not yet. I don't have any proof, and I don't think they'd understand the technical aspects. That's why I'm calling you." Devon was silent for a moment, processing. Then, with a decisiveness that eased some of my panic, he said, "Where are you now?" "At the gas station on Maple Street." I left my car a few blocks away. I think the hacker might be tracking it. "Smart move. Okay, stay there. I'm coming to get you. We'll figure this out." The relief was overwhelming. I wasn't alone anymore. Someone believed me. Someone was coming to help. "Thank you, Devon. The line went dead. I stared at the receiver in confusion, then tried to redial. Nothing. No dial tone, no connection, just dead air. A cold dread settled over me. I looked up at the attendant, who was still absorbed in his phone. "Excuse me," I called out. "Is something wrong with the phone?" He glanced up, annoyed at the interruption. "Nah, should be working fine." I tried once more, pressing the buttons harder, as if that would somehow force the connection. Still nothing. "It's not working," I said, more to myself than to him. The attendant shrugged, already losing interest. "Phones act up sometimes. Try again later." But I knew it wasn't just a technical glitch. The hacker had found me, had cut off my attempt to reach out for help. I was still trapped in his game. I moved away from the phone, my mind racing. Had Devon heard enough to actually come find me? Or had the connection been severed before he got my location? And even if he was on his way, what then? How could we fight back against someone who seemed to have control over every piece of technology around me? As I stood there, paralyzed by indecision, the lights in the gas station flickered. Once, twice, 3 times. The same pattern as my home lights. The attendant looked up, frowning at the ceiling. "Weird," he muttered. Then the electronic chime at the door sounded, signaling a new customer. I turned, half expecting to see Devon, half fearing it would be the shadowy figure from my security camera. But it was neither. It was a police officer, tall and imposing in his dark uniform. Under normal circumstances, the sight would have been reassuring, but something about his expression, the cold, calculating look in his eyes, sent a wave of unease through me. "Evening, ma'am," he said, his voice flat, emotionless. "We received a report of suspicious activity in this area. Would you mind answering a few questions?" I hesitated, my instincts screaming that something was wrong. How had the police known to come here? Who had reported suspicious activity at 4:30 in the morning at a deserted gas station? "I'm actually just about to leave," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I was just using the phone." The officer stepped closer, blocking my path to the door. "It won't take long. Just a few questions about what you're doing out so late." I glanced at the attendant, hoping for some support, but he had disappeared into the back room. I was alone with this officer, who didn't feel like a real officer at all. "Could I see your badge, please?" I asked, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. A flicker of something, annoyance, amusement, crossed the officer's face. "Of course," he said, reaching toward his belt. But instead of a badge, he pulled out a phone, and on the screen was a message. "You can't escape, Carla. No one is coming to help you." My blood turned to ice. This wasn't a police officer. This was the hacker, or someone working with him. Someone who had been sent to find me, to bring me back into the game. I didn't think. I just moved, darting around him toward the door. He reached for me, fingers grazing my arm, but I was faster, fueled by pure adrenaline and terror. I burst out of the gas station, running blindly into the night. Behind me, I heard the door chime again, followed by heavy footsteps. He was coming after me, the hunter pursuing his prey. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, my lungs burning, my heart threatening to explode in my chest. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed to get away, to find somewhere safe, somewhere beyond the reach of technology and the watchful eyes it provided. As I ran, a car engine roared to life somewhere behind me. Headlights swept across the street, illuminating my fleeing figure. The chase was on, and I was losing. But then, another set of headlights appeared. Coming from the opposite direction, a car screeched to a halt beside me, and the passenger door flew open. "Carla, get in." It was Devin, his face tight with concern and confusion. I didn't hesitate, diving into the car as he accelerated away, leaving the other vehicle and the fake police officer behind. "What the hell is going on?" Devin demanded, casting worried glances at me as he drove. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I struggled to catch my breath, to organize my thoughts into something coherent. "It's worse than I thought," I finally managed. "He's not just in my home network. He's everywhere, and he's not alone." Devin's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Start from the beginning. Tell me everything." And so I did, the words pouring out of me in a frantic stream. The blinking lights, the Morse code messages, the shadowy figure outside my home, the fake police officer. With each detail, Devin's expression grew more grim. "This isn't just some random hacker," he said when I finished. "This is organized, coordinated, and if they're willing to send someone after you physically, then this isn't just about scaring you. They want something from you." "But what?" I asked, the question that had been haunting me since this all began. "I'm nobody. I don't have access to sensitive information. I don't have money. What could they possibly want from me?" Devin was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "I don't know," he finally said, "but we're going to find out, and we're going to stop them." For the first time since the lights had started blinking in my living room, I felt a glimmer of hope. I wasn't alone anymore. I had an ally, someone who believed me, someone who could help me fight back. But as we drove through the darkened streets, heading toward Devon's apartment and what I hoped would be safety, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was exactly what the hacker had planned, that somehow, in ways I couldn't yet understand, I was still playing his game. And the real horror was only just beginning. Devon's apartment felt like a fortress compared to my compromised home. No smart devices, no internet-connected appliances, just the bare essentials and an old-school desktop computer that wasn't even connected to the web. He called it his clean room, a space free from digital surveillance. "I've been paranoid about this stuff for years," he explained as he made us coffee in a manual French press. "Everyone thought I was crazy for not jumping on the smart home bandwagon." I cradled the mug in my hands, savoring the warmth. I hadn't realized how cold I'd become, both physically and emotionally. "Looks like your paranoia paid off." Devon sat across from me at his small kitchen table. In the harsh fluorescent light, I could see the concern etched into his face. "So, let's think this through. Someone's targeted you specifically. They've compromised your home network, your car, possibly your phone. They're sending you threatening messages, and they've even sent someone to physically intimidate you." Put so plainly, it sounded almost absurd. If it hadn't been happening to me, I might not have believed it myself. But why? That's what I can't figure out. Why me? Devon tapped his fingers thoughtfully against his mug. "You said the network was called War Next, and the messages said you weren't the first, just the next. That suggests there have been others before you." A chill ran through me despite the hot coffee. "Others? You mean victims?" "Possibly. And if that's the case, there might be a pattern, something that connects you to these other people." He paused, studying me. "Has anything unusual happened at work recently? Any strange calls or tickets?" I thought back over the past few weeks, trying to recall anything out of the ordinary. Most of my work days blended together, an endless stream of password resets and software troubleshooting. But then a memory surfaced, something I dismissed at the time. "There was one call," I said slowly. "About 2 weeks ago, a woman who said her computer was acting strangely. Lights turning on and off, strange messages appearing on her screen. I thought she was just confused, maybe had a virus or something. I gave her the standard advice: run a scan, update her software, that sort of thing." Devon leaned forward, suddenly alert. "Do you remember her name?" I closed my eyes, trying to recall. "Meredith, I think. Meredith Langley." "We need to find her," Devon said, standing up abruptly. "If she experienced the same thing you're going through now, she might have information that could help us." "But how do we find her? I can't access the call records from work without logging into the system, and if I do that—" "He'll know," Devon finished. "Yeah, that's a problem. But I might have another way." He disappeared into his bedroom, returning a moment later with a small, battered laptop. "This is air-gapped, never been connected to the internet. I use it for my more questionable activities." I raised an eyebrow, but Devon was already focused on the screen, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "I've got a database of public records I downloaded a while back. If Meredith Langley is local, we might be able to find her address." While Devon worked, I found myself drifting toward the window, peering out through a gap in the blinds. The street below was quiet, bathed in the grayish light of early morning. No suspicious vehicles, no lurking figures. But that didn't mean we were safe. Got her, Devon announced. Meredith Langley, 42, lives about 15 minutes from here on Pinecrest Drive. You think we should just go to her house? I asked, uncertain. You have a better idea? We can't call her, not without risking him intercepting the call. And we need to know what happened to her after she experienced what you're going through now. He had a point. And besides, sitting here, waiting for the hacker to make his next move, wasn't exactly appealing. All right, but we need to be careful. No phones, no GPS, nothing that can be tracked. Devon nodded grimly. We'll take the bus. It's not perfect, but it's less traceable than a car. And so, less than an hour after arriving at what I'd thought would be a safe haven, we were back on the streets. The morning rush was beginning. The sidewalks filling with commuters, heading to work, all of them oblivious to the nightmare unfolding around me. We rode the bus in tense silence, both of us scanning the other passengers for any sign of threat. Every person engrossed in their phone, every glance in our direction sent a spike of paranoia through me. But nothing happened. No one followed us as we got off at our stop. No messages appeared on the digital displays inside the bus. Pinecrest Drive was a quiet residential street, lined with modest but well-maintained homes. Meredith Langley's house was near the end, a small ranch-style building with a neatly trimmed lawn and potted flowers on the porch. Looks normal enough, Devon murmured as we approached. But as we got closer, I noticed something off. The blinds were drawn on every window, despite the beautiful morning, and there was a stillness about the place, an absence of life that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Devon rang the doorbell, and we waited. No response. He tried again, then knocked firmly on the door. Still nothing. Maybe she's at work, I suggested, though I didn't believe it myself. Devon moved to one of the windows, cupping his hands around his eyes to peer through a small gap in the blinds. I can't see much, but wait. He stiffened, then turned to me, his face pale. There's mail piled up inside the door. Looks like a lot of it. A cold weight settled in my stomach. How much? Enough that she hasn't been home in days. We exchanged a look, both thinking the same thing, but neither wanting to say it aloud. If Meredith had gone through what I was experiencing now, and she wasn't home, we need to get inside, I said, surprised by my own boldness. Devon hesitated. Breaking and entering is a serious crime, Carla. So is whatever's happening to me. And possibly to her, too. I moved past him to the door, examining the lock. It was a standard deadbolt, nothing fancy. You know how to pick a lock. He gave me a strange look. No, but... He bent down, lifting a pot of geraniums near the door. Underneath was a key. People are predictable. Inside, the house was unnervingly still. The air had that stale quality of a space that hadn't been lived in for some time. Mail was indeed piled under the slot in the door, mostly junk and bills. I picked one up, checking the date. The oldest was from nearly 2 weeks ago. Meredith? Devon called out, his voice echoing in the quiet house. No response. We moved through the rooms cautiously, noting the signs of hasty departure. A half-empty coffee mug on the kitchen counter, a jacket thrown over a chair, a laptop left open on the dining table, though it was powered off. She left in a hurry, I murmured, picking up the jacket. It was a light spring coat, appropriate for the weather 2 weeks ago. Or she was taken, Devon said grimly. I shivered, not wanting to consider that possibility. Let's check the rest of the house. The bedroom was neat but unremarkable. No sign of struggle. No indication of what might have happened to Meredith. It was the home office that finally gave us something to work with. Unlike the rest of the house, the office was a mess. Papers scattered across the desk and floor. Drawers left open. Books pulled from shelves. Someone had been searching for something, and they hadn't been careful about it. "Look at this," Devon said, picking up a notebook from amid the chaos. It was filled with hasty, almost frantic writing. Pages and pages of notes, diagrams, lists of what appeared to be names and dates. I looked over his shoulder, trying to make sense of the scrawled text. What is all this? I'm not sure, but Devon flipped through the pages, stopping at one with a familiar phrase circled multiple times: "War next." My breath caught in my throat. She knew about it. About him. Not just knew, Devon said, his voice tight. "Look at this." She was investigating it. The page was filled with notes about network security, remote access protocols, and something called Project Echo. There were references to other names: Michael Chen, Ayesha Patel, Tomas Rodriguez, all with dates next to them, all within the past year. "I think these might be other victims," I said, a cold dread settling in my stomach. "Look, she's written found dead next to Chen and Patel." Devon's face had gone pale. "This is bigger than we thought, Carla. Much bigger. Meredith wasn't just another victim. She was trying to expose whatever this is." I sank into the desk chair, my legs suddenly weak. "And now she's missing. And I'm next." "Not if I can help it," Devon said firmly. "We have her research now. We can continue what she started, figure out what's going on, and stop it." I wasn't sure I shared his confidence, but I nodded anyway. "We should take this notebook, go back to your place, and—" A sound from the front of the house cut me off. The soft click of a door opening, followed by careful footsteps. Someone was inside. Devon reacted instantly, shoving the notebook into his jacket and pulling me toward the closet. We squeezed inside, closing the door just as the footsteps reached the hallway outside the office. Through a small crack, I could see a figure enter the room. Male, tall, dressed in dark clothing. Not the fake police officer from the gas station, but someone with the same deliberate, predatory movements. He scanned the office slowly, methodically, his gaze eventually settling on the desk where we'd found the notebook. His face hardened. He knew something was missing. He pulled out a phone, speaking in a low voice that I could barely hear. "The notebook is gone. Someone's been here. No, not long ago. The chair is still warm." A pause as he listened to whoever was on the other end. "Understood. I'll find them." He ended the call and began a more thorough search of the room, moving closer to our hiding place with each passing second. My heart was thundering so loudly, I was certain he would hear it. Beside me, Devon was tense, his hand gripping mine so tightly it hurt. The man was just steps away from the closet when a sound from outside, a car horn, a neighbor calling out, distracted him. He turned toward the window, giving us a momentary reprieve. Then his phone rang again. He answered with a curt, "Yes?" Whatever he heard made him straighten, a new urgency in his posture. "I'm on my way." He ended the call and strode out of the room, his footsteps receding down the hallway, followed by the sound of the front door closing. We waited in breathless silence for what felt like an eternity before Devon finally eased the closet door open. "We need to get out of here, now." We moved through the house like ghosts, checking each window before making our way to the back door. The yard behind Meredith's house backed onto a small wooded area, providing some cover as we fled. "We can't go back to my apartment," Devin said, as we hurried through the trees. "It's too risky. They might have followed us there earlier." "Then where do we go?" I asked, panic rising in my throat. "We can't go to my house. We can't use our phones to call for help. We can't even use a car without risking being tracked." Devin was silent for a moment, his face set in grim determination. "I know a place. It's not comfortable, but it's secure. An old server room in the basement of my company's building. It's been abandoned since the upgrade last year, but my keycard still works for it." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all we had. We made our way through back streets and alleyways, avoiding main roads and public transportation as much as possible. Every security camera, every passing car, every person glancing at their phone felt like a potential threat. By the time we reached Devin's office building, it was mid-afternoon. We slipped in through a service entrance, using his key card to access the basement levels without going through the main lobby. The abandoned server room was exactly as Devin had described it. Uncomfortable but secure, windowless, with only one access point and surrounded by concrete walls that blocked most wireless signals. The old equipment had been removed, leaving empty racks and dangling cables, but there were still a few chairs and a desk left behind. "It's not the Ritz," Devin said apologetically, "but we should be safe here for a while." I collapsed into one of the chairs, the events of the past 24 hours finally catching up to me. I hadn't slept, had barely eaten, and had been running on pure adrenaline for hours. What now? Devin pulled out Meredith's notebook, spreading it open on the desk. "Now we figure out what the hell is going on and how to stop it." We spent the next several hours poring over Meredith's research, trying to piece together the fragmented notes and cryptic references. What emerged was a picture more disturbing than anything I had imagined. According to Meredith's notes, Warnext wasn't just a hacker or a network name. It was a project, run by a private security firm called Echo Chamber Technologies. The company specialized in surveillance systems, particularly for smart homes and connected devices. But their real business, the one they kept hidden from public view, was far darker. They had developed a system for using smart home technology to monitor, manipulate, and ultimately control the behavior of targeted individuals. The goal, as far as Meredith had been able to determine, was to perfect a method of remote psychological manipulation that could be sold to the highest bidder, whether that was a government agency, a corporate competitor, or a criminal enterprise. "They're using people as test subjects," Devin said, his voice hollow with horror. "Isolating them, terrorizing them, pushing them to the breaking point just to see how effective their system is." I thought of the messages I'd received, the blinking lights, the shadowy figures, all of it designed to create maximum fear, maximum disorientation. But why me? Why any of us? But as we drove through the darkened streets, heading toward Devin's apartment and what I hoped would be safety, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was exactly what the hacker had planned, that somehow, in ways I couldn't yet understand, I was still playing his game. And the real horror was only just beginning. Devin's apartment felt like a fortress compared to my compromised home. No smart devices, no internet-connected appliances, just the bare essentials and an old-school desktop computer that wasn't even connected to the web. He called it his clean room, a space free from digital surveillance. "I've been paranoid about this stuff for years," he explained, as he made us coffee in a manual French press. "Everyone thought I was crazy for not jumping on the smart home bandwagon." I cradled the mug in my hands, savoring the warmth. I hadn't realized how cold I'd become, both physically and emotionally. Looks like your paranoia paid off. Devin sat across from me at his small kitchen table. In the harsh fluorescent light, I could see the concern etched into his face. So, let's think this through. Someone's targeted you specifically. They've compromised your home network, your car, possibly your phone. They're sending you threatening messages, and they've even sent someone to physically intimidate you. Put so plainly, it sounded almost absurd. If it hadn't been happening to me, I might not have believed it myself. But why? That's what I can't figure out. Why me? Devin tapped his fingers thoughtfully against his mug. You said the network was called War Next, and the messages said you weren't the first, just the next. That suggests there have been others before you. A chill ran through me despite the hot coffee. Others? You mean victims? Possibly. And if that's the case, there might be a pattern, something that connects you to these other people. He paused, studying me. Has anything unusual happened at work recently? Any strange calls or tickets? I thought back over the past few weeks, trying to recall anything out of the ordinary. Most of my work days blended together, an endless stream of password resets and software troubleshooting. But then a memory surfaced, something I dismissed at the time. There was one call, I said slowly. About 2 weeks ago, a woman who said her computer was acting strangely, lights turning on and off, strange messages appearing on her screen. I thought she was just confused, maybe had a virus or something. I gave her the standard advice: run a scan, update her software, that sort of thing. Devin leaned forward, suddenly alert. Do you remember her name? I closed my eyes, trying to recall. Meredith, I think. Meredith Langley. We need to find her, Devin said, standing up abruptly. If she experienced the same thing you're going through now, she might have information that could help us. But how do we find her? I can't access the call records from work without logging into the system, and if I do that, he'll know, Devin finished. Yeah, that's a problem. But I might have another way. He disappeared into his bedroom, returning a moment later with a small, battered laptop. This is air-gapped, never been connected to the internet. I use it for my more questionable activities. I raised an eyebrow, but Devin was already focused on the screen, his fingers flying over the keyboard. I've got a database of public records I downloaded a while back. If Meredith Langley is local, we might be able to find her address. While Devin worked, I found myself drifting toward the window, peering out through a gap in the blinds. The street below was quiet, bathed in the grayish light of early morning. No suspicious vehicles, no lurking figures. But that didn't mean we were safe. Got her, Devin announced. Meredith Langley, 42, lives about 15 minutes from here on Pinecrest Drive. You think we should just go to her house? I asked, uncertain. You have a better idea? We can't call her, not without risking him intercepting the call. And we need to know what happened to her after she experienced what you're going through now. He had a point. And besides, sitting here, waiting for the hacker to make his next move, wasn't exactly appealing. All right, but we need to be careful. No phones, no GPS, nothing that can be tracked. Devin nodded grimly. We'll take the bus. It's not perfect, but it's less traceable than a car. And so, less than an hour after arriving at what I'd thought would be a safe haven, we were back on the streets. The morning rush was beginning. The sidewalks filling with commuters, heading to work, all of them oblivious to the nightmare unfolding around me. We rode the bus in tense silence, both of us scanning the other passengers for any sign of threat. Every person engrossed in their phone. Every glance in our direction sent a spike of paranoia through me. But nothing happened. No one followed us as we got off at our stop. No messages appeared on the digital displays inside the bus. Pinecrest Drive was a quiet residential street, lined with modest but well-maintained homes. Meredith Langley's house was near the end, a small ranch-style building with a neatly trimmed lawn and potted flowers on the porch. "Looks normal enough," Devon murmured as we approached. But as we got closer, I noticed something off. The blinds were drawn on every window, despite the beautiful morning, and there was a stillness about the place, an absence of life that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Devon rang the doorbell, and we waited. No response. He tried again, then knocked firmly on the door. Still nothing. "Maybe she's at work," I suggested, though I didn't believe it myself. Devon moved to one of the windows, cupping his hands around his eyes to peer through a small gap in the blinds. "I can't see much, but wait." He stiffened, then turned to me, his face pale. "There's mail piled up inside the door. Looks like a lot of it." A cold weight settled in my stomach. "How much?" "Enough that she hasn't been home in days." We exchanged a look, both thinking the same thing, but neither wanting to say it aloud. If Meredith had gone through what I was experiencing now, and she wasn't home. "We need to get inside," I said, surprised by my own boldness. Devon hesitated. "Breaking and entering is a serious crime, Carla. So is whatever's happening to me. And possibly to her too." I moved past him to the door, examining the lock. It was a standard deadbolt, nothing fancy. You know how to pick a lock. He gave me a strange look. "No, but..." He bent down, lifting a pot of geraniums near the door. Underneath was a key. People are predictable. Inside, the house was unnervingly still. The air had that stale quality of a space that hadn't been lived in for some time. Mail was indeed piled under the slot in the door, mostly junk and bills. I picked one up, checking the date. The oldest was from nearly 2 weeks ago. "Meredith?" Devon called out, his voice echoing in the quiet house. No response. We moved through the rooms cautiously, noting the signs of hasty departure. A half-empty coffee mug on the kitchen counter, a jacket thrown over a chair, a laptop left open on the dining table, though it was powered off. "She left in a hurry," I murmured, picking up the jacket. It was a light spring coat, appropriate for the weather 2 weeks ago. "Or she was taken," Devon said grimly. I shivered, not wanting to consider that possibility. "Let's check the rest of the house." The bedroom was neat but unremarkable. No sign of struggle. No indication of what might have happened to Meredith. It was the home office that finally gave us something to work with. Unlike the rest of the house, the office was a mess. Papers scattered across the desk and floor. Drawers left open. Books pulled from shelves. Someone had been searching for something, and they hadn't been careful about it. "Look at this," Devon said, picking up a notebook from amid the chaos. It was filled with hasty, almost frantic writing. Pages and pages of notes, diagrams, lists of what appeared to be names and dates. I looked over his shoulder, trying to make sense of the scrawled text. What is all this? I'm not sure, but Devon flipped through the pages, stopping at one with a familiar phrase circled multiple times. "War next." My breath caught in my throat. She knew about it. About him. Not just knew, Devon said, his voice tight. "Look at this." She was investigating it. The page was filled with notes about network security, remote access protocols, and something called Project Echo. There were references to other names: Michael Chen, Ayesha Patel, Tomas Rodriguez, all with dates next to them. all within the past year. I think these might be other victims, I said, a cold dread settling in my stomach. Look, she's written found dead next to Chen and Patel. Devon's face had gone pale. This is bigger than we thought, Carla. Much bigger. Meredith wasn't just another victim. She was trying to expose whatever this is. I sank into the desk chair, my legs suddenly weak. And now she's missing. And I'm next. Not if I can help it, Devon said firmly. We have her research now. We can continue what she started, figure out what's going on, and stop it. I wasn't sure I shared his confidence, but I nodded anyway. We should take this notebook, go back to your place, and... A sound from the front of the house cut me off. The soft click of a door opening, followed by careful footsteps. Someone was inside. Devon reacted instantly, shoving the notebook into his jacket and pulling me toward the closet. We squeezed inside, closing the door just as the footsteps reached the hallway outside the office. Through a small crack, I could see a figure enter the room. Male, tall, dressed in dark clothing. Not the fake police officer from the gas station, but someone with the same deliberate, predatory movements. He scanned the office slowly, methodically, his gaze eventually settling on the desk where we'd found the notebook. His face hardened. He knew something was missing. He pulled out a phone, speaking in a low voice that I could barely hear. The notebook is gone. Someone's been here. No, not long ago. The chair is still warm. A pause as he listened to whoever was on the other end. Understood. I'll find them. He ended the call and began a more thorough search of the room, moving closer to our hiding place with each passing second. My heart was thundering so loudly, I was certain he would hear it. Beside me, Devon was tense, his hand gripping mine so tightly it hurt. The man was just steps away from the closet when a sound from outside, a car horn, a neighbor calling out, distracted him. He turned toward the window, giving us a momentary reprieve. Then his phone rang again. He answered with a curt, "Yes?" Whatever he heard made him straighten, a new urgency in his posture. "I'm on my way." He ended the call and strode out of the room, his footsteps receding down the hallway, followed by the sound of the front door closing. We waited in breathless silence for what felt like an eternity before Devon finally eased the closet door open. We need to get out of here, now. We moved through the house like ghosts, checking each window before making our way to the back door. The yard behind Meredith's house backed onto a small wooded area, providing some cover as we fled. "We can't go back to my apartment," Devon said, as we hurried through the trees. "It's too risky. They might have followed us there earlier." "Then where do we go?" I asked, panic rising in my throat. "We can't go to my house. We can't use our phones to call for help. We can't even use a car without risking being tracked." Devon was silent for a moment, his face set in grim determination. "I know a place. It's not comfortable, but it's secure. An old server room in the basement of my company's building. It's been abandoned since the upgrade last year, but my key card still works for it." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all we had. We made our way through back streets and alleyways, avoiding main roads and public transportation as much as possible. Every security camera, every passing car, every person glancing at their phone felt like a potential threat. By the time we reached Devon's office building, it was mid-afternoon. We slipped in through a service entrance, using his key card to access the basement levels without going through the main lobby. The abandoned server room was exactly as Devon had described it. Uncomfortable but secure, windowless, with only one access point and surrounded by concrete walls that blocked most wireless signals. The old equipment had been removed, leaving empty racks and dangling cables, but there were still a few chairs and a desk left behind. "It's not the Ritz," Devon said apologetically, "but we should be safe here for a while." I collapsed into one of the chairs, the events of the past 24 hours finally catching up to me. I hadn't slept, had barely eaten, and had been running on pure adrenaline for hours. What now? Devon pulled out Meredith's notebook, spreading it open on the desk. Now we figure out what the hell is going on and how to stop it. We spent the next several hours poring over Meredith's research, trying to piece together the fragmented notes and cryptic references. What emerged was a picture more disturbing than anything I had imagined. According to Meredith's notes, Warnext wasn't just a hacker or a network name. It was a project run by a private security firm called Echo Chamber Technologies. The company specialized in surveillance systems, particularly for smart homes and connected devices. But their real business, the one they kept hidden from public view, was far darker. They had developed a system for using smart home technology to monitor, manipulate, and ultimately control the behavior of targeted individuals. The goal, as far as Meredith had been able to determine, was to perfect a method of remote psychological manipulation that could be sold to the highest bidder, whether that was a government agency, a corporate competitor, or a criminal enterprise. "They're using people as test subjects," Devon said, his voice hollow with horror, "isolating them, terrorizing them, pushing them to the breaking point just to see how effective their system is." I thought of the messages I'd received, the blinking lights, the shadowy figures, all of it designed to create maximum fear, maximum disorientation. But why me? Why any of us? Devon flipped to another page in the notebook, where Meredith had listed the known victims. Next to each name was a job title or area of expertise. Michael Chen, Network Security Analyst. Aisha Patel, IoT Developer. Tomas Rodriguez, Privacy Advocate. "They're targeting people with technical knowledge," Devon said slowly. "People who might be able to identify and expose what they're doing." "But I'm just IT support," I protested. "I'm not a security expert or a developer." "No, but you work for a company that develops home automation software," Devon pointed out. "You have access to information about vulnerabilities, about how these systems work, and more importantly, you'd be able to recognize when something wasn't right." It made a sick kind of sense. I wasn't chosen randomly. I was chosen because I knew enough to be a threat, but not enough to immediately understand what was happening to me. "What happened to the others?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew the answer. Devon's expression was grim. According to Meredith's notes, most of them either disappeared or were found dead. Suicide, the official reports said. But she didn't believe it. And Meredith herself? She was getting close to exposing them. She had names, dates, evidence. He tapped the notebook. "Some of it's here, but I think she was keeping the most damning information elsewhere. That's probably what that man was looking for at her house." I leaned back in my chair, trying to process everything. It seemed impossible, like something out of a conspiracy thriller. But I had experienced the terror firsthand. I knew what these people were capable of. "So what do we do now?" I asked. "Go to the police? The FBI? With what evidence? A notebook full of scrawled notes and conspiracy theories? They'd think we were crazy." Devon shook his head. "No, we need something concrete. We need to find the missing piece of Meredith's research, the part that would force authorities to take this seriously. And how do we do that without getting ourselves killed in the process?" Devon was silent for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Then, slowly, a determined smile spread across his face. We use their own system against them. What do you mean? Echo chamber technologies uses smart home devices to spy on and manipulate their targets, right? But every system, no matter how sophisticated, has vulnerabilities. If we can find a way to exploit those vulnerabilities, we might be able to access their servers, find the evidence we need. It was a dangerous plan, bordering on suicidal. But what choice did we have? If we did nothing, I would end up like the others, another suicide case, another victim of a shadowy organization that no one would believe existed. Where do we start? I asked. My decision made. Devon tapped the notebook. Meredith was working on something she called a feedback loop, a way to trace the commands being sent to compromised devices back to their source. If we can implement her design, we might be able to locate Echo Chamber's control center. And then what? We can't exactly walk in and demand answers. No, but we can gather evidence, record their operations, document what they're doing, enough to convince the authorities that this is real. It wasn't much of a plan, fraught with risks and unknowns, but it was all we had. And as the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in that forgotten server room, I made a silent promise to myself, to Meredith, and to all the others who had come before me. I would not be the next victim. I would be the one who brought them down. The abandoned server room became our war room, our sanctuary, our prison. Days blended into nights as Devon and I worked tirelessly, fueled by vending machine snacks and the desperate need to stay one step ahead of our pursuers. Meredith's notebook became our Bible. Her hastily scrawled notes and diagrams our roadmap to understanding the enemy we faced. The more we learned about echo chamber technologies, the more horrifying their operation appeared. They had been running Project War Next for nearly 3 years, targeting at least a dozen individuals with technical backgrounds. The pattern was always the same: isolation, surveillance, psychological manipulation, and finally, elimination. Either the victims broke under the pressure, taking their own lives, or they were disappeared when they got too close to the truth. Meredith had been different. She'd recognized the pattern after her friend Aisha Patel's supposed suicide. She didn't believe Aisha would have killed herself, and she'd started investigating, connecting the dots between similar cases. When Echo Chamber had targeted her, she'd been prepared, using their own tactics to gather information about them. But she'd still vanished, just like the others. And now I was in their crosshairs. The key is the feedback loop, Devon explained, pointing to a diagram in Meredith's notebook. When Echo Chamber sends commands to your devices, they're using a sophisticated relay system to hide their location. But Meredith found a way to trace those signals back to their source. The technical details were complex, involving packet sniffing, signal triangulation, and a modified version of a penetration testing tool. But the concept was simple enough. We would use my compromised devices as bait, waiting for Echo Chamber to make contact, then follow their digital breadcrumbs back to their servers. It's risky, Devon admitted. We'd need to use one of your devices, which means exposing ourselves to them again. My laptop, I said decisively. It's the most likely target, and it'll give us the most information. Devon nodded, though I could see the concern in his eyes. Once we set this up, there's no going back. They'll know we're active, and they'll come after us with everything they've got. They're already coming after us, I pointed out. At least this way we're fighting back. We spent another day preparing, building the feedback loop system, according to Meredith's specifications. Devon was a skilled programmer, but even he struggled with some of the more advanced concepts. We had to improvise, filling in gaps in Meredith's notes with our own solutions. Finally, as the third day in our underground hideout dawned, we were ready. "Remember the plan," Devin said as we set up my laptop. "We turn it on, connect to the public Wi-Fi, and wait for them to make contact. Once they do, the feedback loop will activate, tracing their signal. We only need to keep the connection open for 3 minutes to get a solid trace." I nodded, my mouth dry with anticipation and fear. "And if something goes wrong?" He squeezed my hand reassuringly. "We pull the plug, destroy the laptop, and run like hell." We had chosen a cafe across town for the operation, reasoning that a public place would provide some protection against physical confrontation. We arrived separately, Devin going in first to secure a table in the corner, away from security cameras but with a clear view of the exits. I joined him 20 minutes later, the laptop clutched tightly under my arm. The cafe was busy, filled with the morning rush of commuters grabbing coffee before work. The noise and movement would make it harder for anyone to approach us unnoticed. "Ready?" Devin asked as I sat down. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Ready." I opened the laptop, and Devin connected it to a small device he'd built, the heart of our feedback loop system. Then I powered it on, watching with a mixture of dread and anticipation as the screen flickered to life. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. The laptop booted normally, connecting to the cafe's Wi-Fi without issue. I began to wonder if our plan had failed before it even started. Maybe Echo Chamber had lost interest in me. Maybe they'd moved on to another target. Then the screen flickered, just once, and a message appeared. "Did you think you could hide from me, Carla?" My heart raced, but I forced myself to remain calm. This was what we wanted. They had taken the bait. "I've been watching you and your friend. Did you really think that server room was secure?" I glanced at Devin, who nodded encouragingly. The feedback loop was working, silently tracing the connection back to its source. We just needed to keep them talking. I typed a response, my fingers trembling slightly. "Who are you?" The reply came instantly. "I am the future of control, of security, of power, and you are an obstacle that needs to be removed." 2 minutes, Devin whispered, watching the progress of the trace on his device. "Keep them talking." "What did you do to Meredith Langley?" I typed. There was a pause, longer this time. "Then Meredith made the same mistake you're making now. She thought she could expose us. She thought she could stop what's coming. She was wrong." "What's coming?" I asked, genuinely curious, despite my fear. "A world where privacy is an illusion, where every device, every system, every network is an extension of our will, where people like you no longer matter." 30 seconds, Devin murmured. "We're almost there." But as he spoke, I noticed a shift in the atmosphere of the cafe. A man at the counter was speaking urgently into his phone, his gaze fixed on our table. Near the door, another man had appeared, tall and imposing, with the unmistakable bulge of a concealed weapon under his jacket. "Devin," I whispered urgently, "we've got company." He glanced up, his expression tightening as he spotted the men. 15 seconds. Just 15 more seconds. The man by the door was moving toward us now, his hand reaching inside his jacket. The other was circling around, cutting off our exit through the back. "Devin." 10 seconds. The first man was less than 10 feet away now, his eyes cold and focused. I saw his hand emerge from his jacket, something metallic gleaming in his palm. "Time to go," Devin said, disconnecting the device from my laptop with a swift movement. He stuffed it into his pocket, then grabbed my arm, pulling me up from the chair. The sudden movement caught our pursuers off guard, giving us a precious few seconds of advantage. We bolted toward the service entrance, shoving past startled baristas and knocking over a tray of pastries in our haste. Behind us, I heard shouts, the sound of tables being overturned as the men gave chase. We burst through the service door into an alley behind the cafe, running as if our lives depended on it, because they did. Did we get it? I gasped as we ran. Did the trace work? Devin pulled the device from his pocket, checking the display as we ducked around a corner. Yes, we've got their location, an office building downtown, the Meridian Tower. A surge of triumph cut through my fear. We had done it. We had found Echo Chamber's base of operations. Now we just had to stay alive long enough to use that information. We zigzagged through alleys and side streets, putting as much distance as possible between ourselves and our pursuers. Eventually, winded and aching, we took shelter in the basement of an abandoned building. Devin knew from his urban exploration days. "What now?" I asked, once we had caught our breath. "We know where they are, but what good does that do us?" Devin pulled out the device again, studying the data we had captured. It's not just their location. The feedback loop gave us something even more valuable: access codes. I stared at him, not comprehending. Access codes to their network. When they connected to your laptop, the feedback loop didn't just trace the signal. It captured the authentication protocols they used. With these, we can get into their system. Hope flared in my chest, quickly tempered by caution. They'll be expecting that. They'll know we might have captured their codes. Yes, but they won't be expecting us to move this quickly. They'll assume we'll take time to plan, to prepare. But we're going in tonight. Tonight? I echoed, incredulous. Devin, that's insane. We need a plan, backup, something more than just access codes. He looked at me, his expression a mixture of determination and resignation. We don't have time for a better plan. They know we're on to them now. They'll change their protocols, increase security. This might be our only chance. He was right, and I knew it. Echo Chamber had shown they were willing to kill to protect their operation. They wouldn't hesitate to eliminate any vulnerability, including the access points we had discovered. So we just walk into their headquarters and hope for the best? I asked, trying to keep the fear from my voice. Not exactly, Devin said, a grim smile forming on his face. We're going to use their own tactics against them, a little psychological warfare of our own. As night fell, we approached the Meridian Tower cautiously. It was a sleek, modern building in the heart of the financial district, its glass facade reflecting the city lights. During business hours, it would be bustling with activity, but at 2 a.m., it was nearly deserted. The trace led to the 18th floor, Devin said as we observed from across the street. According to public records, that floor is leased to a company called Integrated Solutions Group, a shell corporation, almost certainly. Our plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal. Using the access codes we had captured, we would infiltrate Echo Chamber's network and trigger their own surveillance protocols. Essentially, we would turn their system against itself, creating a digital feedback loop that would flood their servers with their own data, temporarily paralyzing their operations. During that window of vulnerability, we would access their main database and extract the evidence we needed, proof of their illegal operations, their targets, their methods, enough to take to the authorities and ensure they couldn't simply disappear us like they had the others. Ready? Devin asked, handing me a small device he had built, a modified Wi-Fi adapter that would transmit the access codes. I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage I possessed. Ready. We approached the building from the parking garage, using a service entrance that Devon had identified as having minimal security. The access codes got us through the first layer of electronic locks, but we knew that was just the beginning. The service elevator took us to the 17th floor, one below our target. We would approach the final stretch on foot, minimizing our exposure to security cameras and electronic systems that might detect us. As we crept through the darkened office space of the 17th floor, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a trap. It had all been too easy. The trace, the access codes, our entry into the building. Echo chamber was too sophisticated to leave such obvious vulnerabilities. Devon, I whispered as we reached the stairwell that would take us to the 18th floor. This doesn't feel right. He paused, his hand on the door. I know, but what choice do we have? We can't run forever, and we can't let them keep doing this to people. He was right. Whatever awaited us on the 18th floor, whether it was the evidence we sought or a trap set by our pursuers, we had to face it. We ascended the stairs silently, pausing at the door to the 18th floor. Devon pulled out his device, checking the signal strength. Their network is active. I'm detecting at least 3 separate systems: security, operations, and something else, something heavily encrypted. Project War next, I murmured. He nodded grimly. Most likely. We need to get to a terminal, preferably one that's already logged into their system, that will give us the access we need without triggering additional security protocols. We eased the door open, peering into the darkened office space beyond. It looked like a typical corporate environment. Cubicles, conference rooms, a reception area, but the walls were lined with servers and sophisticated electronic equipment that had no place in a normal office. There, Devon whispered, pointing to a glass-walled room at the far end of the space. That looks like their control center. We moved through the office carefully, staying low and avoiding the few security cameras we could identify. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the soft hum of electronic equipment and the pounding of my heart in my ears. The control center was unlocked, another red flag that made my skin crawl with apprehension. Inside, multiple monitors displayed surveillance feeds, network diagnostics, and what appeared to be live data from targets around the city. Devon went straight to the main terminal, connecting his device to an open port. I'm in, he said after a moment, his voice tight with concentration, initiating the feedback loop now. As he worked, I scanned the monitors, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. One screen showed a residential street, my street. Another displayed what appeared to be vital signs: heart rate, blood pressure, stress indicators, labeled with names. My name was among them. They're monitoring us physically, I realized with horror. Not just our devices, but our bodies, our reactions. It's all part of the system, Devon said without looking up. They're studying how we respond to fear, to isolation, to perceived threats, building a model of human psychology that they can exploit. But why? What's the end goal? Before Devon could answer, a new window appeared on the main screen, a message box with a single line of text. Welcome, Carla. We've been expecting you. A chill ran down my spine. Devon, he saw it too, his hands freezing over the keyboard. It's a trap. They knew we were coming. As if in response to his words, the lights in the control center flickered on, and a voice spoke from speakers hidden in the ceiling. Of course we knew you were coming, Mr. Norris. Did you really think your little feedback loop was so clever? We've been tracking your movements since you left the server room 3 days ago. The voice was calm, almost friendly, which somehow made it all the more terrifying. I spun around, searching for its source, but there was no one else in the room. "Who are you?" I demanded. "What do you want from us?" "My name is Dr. Malcolm Reed," the voice replied. "I'm the director of Project War Next. And what I want, Miss Thorne, is very simple. I want to understand how the human mind responds to fear. Real, primal fear. The kind that can't be simulated in a laboratory." "You're experimenting on people," Devon said, his voice thick with disgust. "Terrorizing them, driving them to suicide. Some subjects do choose that exit, yes," Reed acknowledged, his tone clinical, detached. "Others simply disappear. But a select few, like Miss Thorne here, demonstrate remarkable resilience, the capacity to fight back, to adapt to extreme psychological pressure. Those are the subjects that interest me most." "You're insane," I said, backing toward the door. But as I reached for the handle, I heard the unmistakable sound of an electronic lock engaging. "I prefer visionary," Reed said. "What we're developing here will revolutionize everything, from military operations to corporate competition to political campaigns. The ability to remotely manipulate human behavior through their own devices, their own environments, the ultimate form of control." As he spoke, the monitors around us changed, displaying new images. People in their homes, in their cars, at their workplaces, all of them unaware they were being watched, being manipulated. "You're playing God," Devon said, still working frantically at the terminal. I realized he was trying to complete our original mission, despite the trap we had walked into. "Someone has to," Reed replied. "Technology has evolved faster than our understanding of its implications. I'm simply ensuring that evolution serves a purpose." "By terrorizing innocent people," I challenged, trying to keep him talking while Devon worked. "By driving them to suicide." "Collateral damage," Reed dismissed. "Unfortunate, but necessary for progress. And speaking of progress, I'm afraid your little hacking attempt is futile, Mr. Norris. Our systems are designed to resist exactly the kind of attack you're attempting." Devon ignored him, his fingers flying over the keyboard. I moved closer, trying to see what he was doing. On the screen, I could see he had accessed a database, files scrolling past too quickly to read. "You won't succeed," Reed continued, his voice taking on a harder edge. "And even if you somehow did extract data from our systems, who would believe you? Two paranoid individuals with wild claims about a conspiracy to control people through their smart homes. You'd be dismissed as lunatics." He was right, and that realization was more terrifying than anything else. Even with evidence, who would take us seriously? The technology was too advanced, the concept too fantastical for most people to accept. "We have to try," I said, more to Devon than to Reed. "We can't let them keep doing this." Devon nodded, not looking up from his work. "Almost there. Just need to..." The screen suddenly went black, plunging the control center into momentary darkness before emergency lights activated. Devon sat back, a triumphant smile on his face. "What did you do?" I asked. "I couldn't extract their data. Their security was too good for that. But I could trigger their own emergency protocols. The system is designed to protect itself if compromised, which means a complete shutdown and data purge." Reed's voice interrupted, now tinged with anger. "Clever, Mr. Norris. You've set our work back significantly, but you haven't stopped us." "No," Devon agreed, standing up. "But we've bought time. And more importantly, we've identified you, Dr. Reed. Your name, your face, your operation. Information that's now being transmitted to secure servers outside your reach. This was news to me, but I kept my expression neutral, playing along with whatever strategy Devon was pursuing. A bluff, Reed scoffed. Our jamming systems would prevent any unauthorized transmissions. Would they? Devon challenged. Are you willing to bet your entire operation on that? Because I've just sent everything we found, including this conversation, to every major news outlet, law enforcement agency, and tech security firm in the country. There was a pause, the silence heavy with tension. Then Reed spoke again, his voice tight with controlled fury. You're both dead. You understand that, don't you? Whether you leave this building or not, whether your alleged transmission went through or not, you will not live to see the morning. My people are already on their way to this floor. As if to emphasize his point, we heard the distant sound of an elevator arriving, followed by footsteps in the main office area. Then I guess we've got nothing to lose, Devon said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small device I hadn't seen before. It looked like a miniature EMP generator, the kind used in penetration testing to temporarily disable electronic security systems. What are you doing? I asked, alarmed. Plan B, he said grimly. If we can't expose them through their own data, we'll expose them through their actions. He activated the device, and instantly, every electronic system in the control center went dead. The emergency lights, the speakers, the electronic locks, all disabled in a burst of targeted electromagnetic energy. Run, Devon shouted, grabbing my hand and pulling me toward the now unlocked door. We burst out into the main office area just as Reed's security team rounded the corner. There were 3 of them, dressed in black, weapons drawn, but they hesitated, momentarily confused by our sudden appearance in the darkened space. That hesitation was all we needed. We sprinted toward the stairwell, ducking behind cubicles as the first shots were fired. The bullets thudded into walls and furniture around us, missing us by inches. We reached the stairwell and plunged downward, taking the steps 2 at a time in our desperate flight. Behind us, the door slammed open as our pursuers gave chase. 18th floor to ground level is too far, Devon gasped as we ran. They'll catch us before we reach the bottom. What's the alternative? 10th floor. There's a sky bridge to the adjacent building. If we can reach it, we might be able to lose them. It was a slim chance, but better than trying to outrun professional killers down 18 flights of stairs. We burst out onto the 10th floor, racing through another darkened office space toward the sky bridge Devon had mentioned. Behind us, the stairwell door banged open again. Our pursuers were closing in. The sky bridge was there, just as Devon had said, a glass-enclosed walkway connecting the Meridian Tower to the building next door. But as we approached, my heart sank. The door was locked, requiring a keycard for access.
Devon, it's locked.
He didn't slow down. Stand back. Before I could ask what he was planning, he lowered his shoulder and charged the door. The impact was tremendous, the sound of shattering glass echoing through the empty office. The door hadn't opened, but the glass panel beside it had broken, leaving a jagged opening just large enough for us to climb through. Go, Devon urged, his arm bleeding from where the glass had cut him. I scrambled through the opening, Devon right behind me. We sprinted across the sky bridge, the city lights gleaming far below, through the glass walls. The adjacent building was dark, apparently unoccupied at this hour, a small mercy in our desperate flight. Behind us, our pursuers had reached the broken door. More shots rang out, bullets shattering the glass panels of the sky bridge around us. We kept running, reaching the far side and bursting through the door into the other building. "Where now?" I gasped, struggling to catch my breath. "Down," Devon said, leading the way to another stairwell, all the way down. "There's a service entrance on the ground floor that should let us out onto a side street." We descended in a controlled rush, listening for sounds of pursuit. The gunfire had stopped, likely because Reed's people didn't want to attract attention with gunshots in two separate buildings, but we could hear doors banging open above us as they continued the chase. Finally, we reached the ground floor. Devon led me through a maze of service corridors, past boiler rooms and maintenance closets, until we reached a metal door marked "Emergency Exit Only. Alarm will sound." "Perfect," Devon muttered, pushing the door open. The alarm blared immediately, a piercing wail that would bring security running, and more importantly, would confuse our pursuers about our location. We slipped out into the night, the alarm still shrieking behind us, and ran as if our lives depended on it. Because they did. We didn't stop running until we were miles away from the Meridian Tower, our lungs burning, our legs trembling with exhaustion. We had ducked through alleys, doubled back on our route, and used every trick we could think of to shake any pursuit. Finally, huddled in the shadow of an overpass, we allowed ourselves to rest. "Do you think we lost them?" I asked between gasping breaths. Devon leaned against the concrete wall, clutching his injured arm. The cut from the broken glass had stopped bleeding, but his sleeve was stiff with dried blood. "For now, but they won't stop looking." "What do we do now? You said you sent information to news outlets and law enforcement, but that was a bluff, wasn't it?" He gave me a tired smile. "Yes and no. I didn't send anything during our confrontation with Reed. You're right that their jamming systems would have prevented it, but before we even entered the building, I set up a dead man's switch." "A what?" "A program that will automatically send everything we've discovered to multiple recipients if I don't reset it every 12 hours. Names, locations, Meredith's research, our own findings, all of it packaged with a detailed explanation and enough evidence to make it credible." Hope flared in my chest. "So even if they catch us?" "The truth gets out anyway," Devon confirmed. "Reed and his people can't silence everyone. Once the information is public, they'll have too many fronts to fight on." It was a brilliant strategy, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a genuine sense of optimism. We might not survive this, but Echo Chamber's reign of terror would end. "But we still need to stay alive for the next 12 hours, I pointed out. "Where do we go? They'll be watching your apartment, my house, probably even the server room by now." Devon was silent for a moment, considering our options. "I have a friend who owns a cabin in the mountains, about 2 hours from here. No internet, no smart devices, completely off the grid. I helped him set it up that way specifically because he's paranoid about technology. If we can get there, we might be safe until the dead man's switch activates." "How do we get there without a car?" "We can't risk public transportation. Too many cameras." "We steal one," Devon said simply. "Or rather, we borrow one. I know a guy who runs a chop shop near here. He owes me a favor." It was a desperate plan, but desperation was all we had left. We made our way through the pre-dawn city, staying in shadows, avoiding main streets and security cameras. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten when we reached the auto shop. Devon had mentioned a dingy garage tucked between abandoned warehouses in an industrial area. To my surprise, despite the early hour, the shop was active. The sound of metal on metal echoed from inside, accompanied by the occasional flash of a welding torch. Devon approached cautiously, knocking on a side door in a specific pattern. The door cracked open, revealing a heavily tattooed man with suspicious eyes. "We're closed," he growled. "Marco, it's Devon. I need that favor." Recognition flickered across the man's face, followed by wariness. "You got cops on your tail? 'Cause I ain't getting involved in that shit." "Not cops," Devon assured him. "But we need to disappear for a while. Just need a car. Something untraceable. I'll have it back to you in a day or two." Marco studied us for a long moment, his gaze lingering on Devon's blood-stained sleeve. "You in some kind of trouble?" "The less you know, the better," Devon said. "But I swear it's not what you're thinking. We're the good guys here." Another long pause. Then Marco stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in, quick." Inside, the garage was a hive of activity, men working on various vehicles in different stages of disassembly. Marco led us to a small office in the back, closing the door behind us. "I can give you a car," he said, leaning against his desk. "But there's gonna be conditions. 1, you don't tell nobody where you got it. 2, you bring it back exactly as it is. No damage, no evidence, nothing that can lead back to my shop. 3, you tell me what the hell is going on, because you look like you've seen a ghost, both of you." Devon and I exchanged glances. We couldn't tell him everything, but we needed his help. "We uncovered something," I said carefully. "Something big, powerful people doing terrible things. They're after us because we know too much." Marco snorted. "That's some spy movie bullshit right there." "It's the truth," Devon insisted. "We just need to stay hidden for about 12 hours. After that, it won't matter. The information gets out whether we're alive or not." Something in Devon's tone must have convinced Marco, because his expression shifted from skepticism to reluctant acceptance. "All right, I got a car you can use. Nothing fancy, but it's clean. No GPS, no tracking devices, cash-only transaction from a private seller. Untraceable." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a set of keys, tossing them to Devon. "Blue Toyota in the back lot. Take it and go. And Devon, we're even after this." Devon nodded gratefully. "More than even. I owe you now." 20 minutes later, we were on the highway, heading out of the city, the rising sun painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Under different circumstances, it might have been beautiful, but all I could think about was the countdown ticking in my head. 12 hours until the dead man's switch activated. 12 hours to stay alive. "You should try to sleep," Devon suggested, glancing at me with concern. "You've been awake for what, 36 hours now?" It was true. Exhaustion weighed on me like a physical presence, making my thoughts sluggish and my eyes heavy. But every time I closed them, I saw Reed's monitors, the surveillance feeds of people unaware they were being watched, being manipulated. I saw Meredith's frantic notes, the names of the victims who hadn't survived Echo Chambers' experiments. "I can't," I said simply. "Not yet." Devon didn't push the issue. He drove in silence, taking back roads and avoiding major highways where traffic cameras might spot us. The city gave way to suburbs, then to rolling countryside, and finally to the forested foothills of the mountains. The cabin, when we reached it, was exactly as Devon had described. A small, rustic structure nestled among tall pines, completely isolated from the outside world. No power lines, no satellite dish, not even a paved road leading to it. Just wilderness and silence. "Your friend really is paranoid," I remarked as we pulled up to the cabin. "Darren's been prepping for the technological apocalypse since the 90s, Devon said with a faint smile. "Used to think he was crazy. Now I'm not so sure." Inside, the cabin was basic but comfortable. A main room with a wood stove, a small kitchen area, a bedroom, and a bathroom with a pump-operated water system. Solar panels provided minimal electricity, enough for lights and a small refrigerator, but there was no internet, no television, no connection to the outside world. "We should be safe here," Devon said, checking the windows and doors to ensure they were secure. "Even if Echo Chamber somehow tracks us to this general area, they'd have a hard time finding this specific location. It's not on any maps, and Darren owns the surrounding land as well." I collapsed onto a worn but comfortable couch, the adrenaline that had kept me going finally ebbing away. "What time is it? How long until the switch activates?" Devon checked his watch. An old-fashioned analog model. Nothing that could be tracked. Just after 8 a.m. The switch activates at 6 p.m. 10 hours to go. 10 hours. It seemed both an eternity and no time at all. I closed my eyes, just for a moment, and felt myself drifting immediately towards sleep. I fought it, forcing my eyes open again. "You need rest," Devon said gently. "I'll keep watch. We'll take shifts." I wanted to argue, to insist that I was fine, that I could stay awake, but exhaustion was overwhelming me, pulling me under like a powerful tide. "Wake me in 4 hours," I murmured, already half asleep. "Then it's your turn." I didn't hear his response. Sleep claimed me, deep and dreamless, a temporary escape from the nightmare our lives had become. When I woke, the quality of light through the cabin windows had changed. The sun was lower, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. I sat up abruptly, disoriented and alarmed. "What time is it?" I called out, looking for Devon. He emerged from the kitchen area, a mug of something steaming in his hand. "Almost 3. You needed the sleep." "3?" I echoed, incredulous. "You were supposed to wake me after 4 hours." "You needed the sleep," he repeated, handing me the mug. It contained instant coffee, strong and bitter, and nothing happened. "We're still safe." I took the coffee gratefully, trying to shake off the lingering fog of deep sleep. 3 hours until the switch activates. Then what? We just wait for the world to explode? Devon sat beside me on the couch, his expression thoughtful. "Once the information is out there, we'll need to come forward. Validate it with our testimony. It won't be easy. Echo Chamber will fight back, try to discredit us, maybe even try to eliminate us, despite the exposure. But with enough media attention, enough public scrutiny, they won't be able to simply make us disappear." It was a sobering assessment. Even after our dead man switch activated, even after the truth was exposed, we wouldn't be completely safe. Echo Chamber had resources, connections, influence. They wouldn't go down without a fight. "Is it worth it?" I asked quietly. "All of this. The risk, the fear, the uncertainty. We could have just run, tried to disappear ourselves." Devon looked at me, his gaze steady and determined. "You know the answer to that. You've seen what they're doing to people, what they were doing to you, what they did to Meredith and the others. If we don't stop them, who will?" He was right, of course. Running wouldn't have saved us, not in the long term, and it certainly wouldn't have saved the next person on Echo Chamber's list, or the one after that. This was bigger than our own survival. "I know," I said, setting down the empty mug. I just needed to hear someone else say it. We spent the next few hours preparing for what would come after the switch activated. Devon had a satellite phone, another of Darren's paranoid preparations that we could use to contact authorities once we were ready to come forward. We rehearsed our story, organizing the evidence we had collected, making sure we could present a coherent and compelling case against Echo Chamber. As 6 o'clock approached, a strange calm settled over me. Whatever happened now, we had done everything we could. The truth would come out, one way or another. Echo Chamber's days of operating in the shadows were numbered. "It's time," Devin said, checking his watch one last time. 6 p.m. The switch has activated. We sat in silence for a moment, imagining the cascade of information now flooding into inboxes across the country. News organizations, law enforcement agencies, tech security firms, all receiving detailed evidence of Echo Chamber's activities, their targets, their methods, all learning about Project War Next and the horrifying experiments conducted on unwitting victims. "How long do you think it will take?" I asked. "For the story to break, for authorities to act?" Devin shrugged. "Hours, maybe. Depends on who takes it seriously first. But once it starts, it will spread quickly. The technical community will recognize the significance immediately. The public might take longer to understand, but the media will run with it. It's too sensational to ignore." We decided to wait until morning before making contact ourselves. Give the information time to circulate, to be verified by independent sources. It was a calculated risk. Echo Chamber might still be hunting us, but coming forward too soon might undermine our credibility. As night fell, we secured the cabin as best we could, taking turns keeping watch while the other rested. I found myself unable to sleep despite my earlier exhaustion, my mind racing with thoughts of what the coming days would bring. Would anyone believe our story? Would Reed and his people be held accountable? Or would they find a way to twist the narrative, to paint us as the villains in this strange, terrifying tale? Dawn was just breaking when we heard the sound of vehicles approaching, multiple engines, moving slowly but deliberately through the forest toward the cabin. Devin was by the window in an instant, peering through a gap in the curtains. 3 SUVs, he reported, his voice tight. Black, unmarked, coming up the access road. My heart sank. Echo Chamber? How did they find us? I don't know, but they're here now. He moved quickly to the back of the cabin, gesturing for me to follow. There's a trail through the woods, leads to a ravine about half a mile from here. If we can reach it, we might be able to lose them in the terrain. But even as he spoke, I knew it was futile. If Echo Chamber had found us here, in this isolated cabin miles from anywhere, they would have the resources to track us through the wilderness as well. Running would only delay the inevitable. "Wait," I said, grabbing his arm. "What if it's not Echo Chamber? What if it's the authorities? The FBI or someone responding to the information we sent?" Devin paused, considering the possibility. "Maybe, but we can't take that chance. If it's Reed's people..." He was interrupted by a voice from outside, amplified by a bullhorn. "Carla Thorne, Devin Norris, this is the FBI. We know you're in there. Come out with your hands visible." We exchanged glances, hope warring with suspicion. It could be legitimate, or it could be another of Echo Chamber's tricks, like the fake police officer at the gas station. "We need proof," I said. "Something only real FBI agents would have or know." Devin nodded, moving back to the window. "Identify yourselves," he called out. "Show credentials." There was a pause, then the voice spoke again. "We're here in response to information received regarding Echo Chamber Technologies and Project War Next. We have agents at the Meridian Tower as we speak, securing evidence and detaining suspects. Please come out so we can take your statements and ensure your safety." It was the right response. They knew about Echo Chamber, about Project War Next, details that only someone who had received our information would know. But still, caution made us hesitate. One agent, Devon called back. Unarmed, with visible identification. The rest stay by the vehicles. Another pause. Then, agreed, agent coming forward now. We watched as a single figure detached from the group by the SUVs, walking slowly toward the cabin with hands clearly visible. It was a woman, tall and professional in a dark suit, a badge held out in front of her. FBI Special Agent Diana Warren, she called as she approached. I'm going to place my credentials on the porch and step back. Please verify them at your convenience. She did as promised, setting a leather wallet on the porch steps, then retreating several paces. Devon and I looked at each other, a silent communication passing between us. This felt legitimate, but after everything we'd been through, trust didn't come easily. I'll check, Devon said, moving toward the door. Stay back, out of sight. I positioned myself where I could see Devon, but remain hidden from anyone outside. He opened the door cautiously, keeping most of his body behind it, as he reached for the credentials. A quick examination, then he straightened slightly. Looks real, he said over his shoulder. FBI field office, badge number, the works. I joined him at the door, peering past him at the agent waiting patiently in the yard. She was alone, as promised, her posture non-threatening but alert. Miss Thorne, Mr. Norris, she called. The information you provided has been verified by our technical analysts. We've been investigating echo chamber for months, but lacked the concrete evidence to move against them. What you sent us was the missing piece. Dr. Reed and several key members of his organization are in custody as we speak. Relief washed over me. So powerful it made my knees weak. Devon must have felt it too. I saw his shoulders sag slightly, the tension draining from his body. It's over, I whispered, hardly daring to believe it. We did it. Not quite over, Agent Warren corrected, having heard my words. We'll need your full testimony, and there will be a lengthy investigation. Echo Chamber had powerful clients, influential backers. This won't be a simple case. But the hardest part was behind us. We had survived. We had exposed the truth. And most importantly, we had stopped Reed and his people from targeting anyone else, from turning more lives into twisted psychological experiments. We emerged from the cabin into the clear morning light, walking toward Agent Warren with a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. As we approached, she offered us a small, professional smile. You've been through quite an ordeal, she said, but what you've done is extraordinary. You've saved lives, Miss Thorne, not just your own, but others who would have been targeted in the future. I thought of Meredith, of Michael Chen and Aisha Patel, and the others who hadn't survived Echo Chamber's experiments. They deserved justice, and now, finally, they would get it. What happens now? Devon asked as we were led toward the waiting SUVs. Now, Agent Warren said, you tell us everything, from the beginning. The investigation lasted months. Echo Chamber's operation was more extensive than even we had realized, with tentacles reaching into government agencies, major corporations, and international organizations. Dr. Reed and his core team faced multiple charges, from illegal surveillance to conspiracy to commit murder. The technology they had developed was placed under strict federal control, studied by experts to ensure it could never be used against civilians again. Meredith's body was never found, but her research combined with our testimony ensured that her sacrifice wasn't in vain. She was posthumously recognized for her courage in uncovering Echo Chamber's activities. Her name cleared of the fabricated mental health issues Reed's people had used to discredit her. As for me, I never felt truly safe in my home again. The hum of the refrigerator, the subtle buzz of my computer running in the background. These sounds that once comforted me now set my nerves on edge, a constant reminder of how easily the technology we depend on can be turned against us. I moved to a small house in the countryside, with minimal smart technology and multiple layers of security. Some might call it paranoia, but I call it survival. I know firsthand how fragile the illusion of safety can be, how quickly control can be stripped away. Devin and I stayed in touch, bound by the shared trauma of our experience. He went back to his job eventually, but with a new focus on security and privacy advocacy. Together we established a support network for survivors of technological abuse, helping others reclaim their lives from those who would use innovation as a weapon. The world moved on, as it always does. Echo Chamber became a cautionary tale, a footnote in the ongoing conversation about privacy and surveillance in the digital age. For most people, it was just another news story, shocking but ultimately distant from their daily lives. But for me, it was a watershed moment, a dividing line between before and after. I wasn't the same person who had once dismissed smart homes as just a convenience. I had seen the darkness lurking behind the screen, the malevolence that can hide in the spaces between our connected lives. I had been hunted, watched, manipulated. I had fought back and survived, and in doing so, I had learned a truth both terrifying and empowering. In a world where technology can be weaponized against you, your greatest defense is not isolation, but knowledge, not fear, but vigilance. I never felt truly safe again. But perhaps that's as it should be, because the price of safety is awareness, and I am more aware now than I ever was before. I am no longer the prey. I am the watcher. I should have trusted my instincts the moment I saw the rental listing. The price was too good to be true. A 3-bedroom Victorian house in a decent neighborhood for half the market rate. But I was desperate. My divorce had left me financially drained, and I needed somewhere to start over. When I called the number, the landlord, Mrs. Henley, seemed almost eager to get me signed up without even meeting me first. "You'll love it," she said over the phone, her voice crackling through what sounded like an old landline. "It's been in my family for generations, just needs someone to appreciate its character." The house sat at the end of Millbrook Lane, separated from its neighbors by overgrown hedges and a wrought iron fence that had seen better days. As I pulled into the gravel driveway that first afternoon in October, I noticed how the other houses on the street seemed to turn away from it, their windows facing different directions, as if deliberately avoiding eye contact. The Victorian was undeniably beautiful, with intricate gingerbread trim and a wraparound porch that must have been stunning in its heyday. But paint peeled from its clapboard siding like dead skin, and several shutters hung at odd angles. The front garden was a tangle of thorny rose bushes and weeds that seemed to move even when there was no wind. Mrs. Henley met me at the front door, a tiny woman in her 70s, with silver hair pulled back so tightly it stretched her features. Her handshake was surprisingly strong, and her pale blue eyes seemed to look right through me. "You're sure you want to live here alone?" she asked, as she handed me the keys. "Most folks prefer company in old houses like this." I assured her I was fine with solitude. After the chaos of my marriage falling apart, silence felt like a luxury. How wrong I was. The interior was a time capsule of faded grandeur. Heavy velvet curtains blocked most of the natural light, and the hardwood floors creaked ominously under every step. The furniture that came with the house was antique but well maintained. A mahogany dining set, a leather wingback chair by the fireplace, and an ornate grandfather clock that had stopped working, its hands frozen at 3:17. I spent that first week settling in, unpacking boxes, and trying to make the place feel like home. But small things kept bothering me. Doors I remembered closing would be standing open. The temperature would drop suddenly in certain rooms for no apparent reason, and there were the sound soft footsteps in the hallway at night, the whisper of fabric against wood, sometimes what sounded like hushed conversations coming from empty rooms. I told myself it was just an old house settling, my imagination working overtime in an unfamiliar environment. The stress of the divorce, the move, starting over. It was natural that my mind would play tricks on me. But then I found the journal. I was cleaning out the bedroom closet when I discovered it wedged behind a loose floorboard. A leather-bound book filled with entries dating back nearly 50 years. The handwriting was feminine and precise, belonging to someone named Margaret Whitmore. As I read her words, a chill ran down my spine. The thing in the walls is getting bolder. Last night it whispered my name through the heating vents. Thomas thinks I'm having another episode, but I know what I heard. The house remembers everything. Every sorrow, every scream, every soul that suffered within these walls. It feeds on our pain. I flipped through more pages, finding increasingly desperate entries about unexplained phenomena, moving objects, and something Margaret called the Shadow Man, who appeared in mirrors and darkened doorways. The final entry was dated just 3 months ago. I can't fight it anymore. It wants me to join the others. Maybe then I'll finally have peace. If someone finds this, please understand. I'm not crazy. The house made me do it. My hands trembled as I closed the journal. I tried to rationalize what I'd read. Maybe Margaret had been mentally ill, or the entries were fiction. But deep down, I knew better, because in the week I'd been living here, I'd experienced some of the same things she described. That night, I lay in bed, listening to the house breathe around me. Old houses do make sounds. Wood expanding and contracting, pipes settling, wind in the eaves. But these sounds seemed almost deliberate, as if the house were trying to communicate. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my bedroom door, slow and measured, like someone pacing back and forth. I grabbed a baseball bat from my closet and crept to the door, pressing my ear against the wood. The footsteps stopped. Then, clear as day, I heard a woman's voice whisper, "Don't leave us alone." My heart hammered against my ribs as I yanked the door open. Bat raised, the hallway was empty, bathed in pale moonlight filtering through the window at the far end. But the air felt different, heavy and expectant, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. I stood there for what felt like hours, every nerve on edge, waiting for something to happen. Eventually, exhaustion won out over fear, and I retreated to my bedroom. But as I closed the door, I could have sworn I saw a shadow detach itself from the darkness at the end of the hall and slip around the corner. Sleep was impossible after that. I spent the rest of the night researching the house online, searching for any information about its history. What I found in the local newspaper archives made my blood run cold. The Millbrook tragedy, as the newspapers had dubbed it, occurred in 1987. An entire family, Robert Whitmore, his wife Margaret, and their 2 young children, had been found dead in the house. The official cause was carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty furnace, but the articles hinted at stranger circumstances. Neighbors reported hearing screams that night, and the first responders described the scene as deeply disturbing, though no specifics were given. What truly chilled me was learning that Margaret Whitmore wasn't the author of the journal I'd found, that Margaret had died 37 years ago. Someone else had been writing in that book, someone who had lived in this house recently, and experienced the same phenomena. I called Mrs. Henley that morning, my voice shaking, as I asked about the previous tenants. "Oh, there have been several over the years," she said, her tone oddly cheerful. "The Colemans stayed for about 6 months in 2018. Then there was young Mr. Peterson. He didn't last more than 3 weeks. Most recently, there was Ms. Sarah Chen. Such a lovely girl. Shame what happened to her." "What happened to her?" There was a long pause. "She had an accident. Fell down the stairs in the middle of the night. Tragic, really. But these old houses can be dangerous if you're not careful." The line went dead before I could ask any more questions. That afternoon, I drove to the local library and requested copies of recent obituaries. Sarah Chen, age 29, had died just 4 months ago from injuries sustained in a fall. Her obituary mentioned she was an artist who had recently moved to town to focus on her work in a peaceful Victorian home. The funeral photo showed a young woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, the kind of person who would never hurt anyone. But if Sarah had died 4 months ago, who had been writing in Margaret's journal just 3 months ago? I returned to the house with a growing sense of dread. As I parked in the driveway, I noticed something that made my stomach lurch. In the upstairs window, my bedroom window, a figure stood silhouetted against the curtains. It was there for just a moment before disappearing, but I knew what I'd seen. Someone was in my house. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, phone in hand, debating whether to call the police. What would I tell them? That I'd seen a shadow in my own window? That I'd found a journal written by a dead woman? They'd think I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. Finally, I gathered my courage and entered the house, baseball bat in hand. I searched every room, every closet, under every bed. Nothing. But in my bedroom, I found something that made my knees go weak. A fresh entry in Margaret's journal, written in different handwriting than the rest. "Welcome home. We've been waiting for you." I stumbled backward, the journal falling from my trembling hands. This was impossible. I'd been carrying the journal with me all day. No one could have written in it while I was gone, unless... The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees in seconds. My breath came out in visible puffs as I watched frost form on the bedroom windows. Then I heard it, a voice that seemed to come from the walls themselves. "Don't be afraid." It was a woman's voice, soft and pleading. "We don't want to hurt you. We just don't want to be alone anymore." I spun around, trying to locate the source of the voice, but it seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Who are you?" I whispered. "I'm Margaret, the real Margaret. We're all here, everyone who died in this house. The house won't let us go." As she spoke, the shadows in the room began to take shape. I could make out the outlines of people, a man in a button-down shirt, 2 small children holding hands, and a young woman with long dark hair who must have been Sarah Chen. They weren't quite solid, more like impressions left in the air, but they were undeniably there. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Help us," Margaret's voice replied. "The house feeds on suffering, on despair. It traps souls here and uses their pain to sustain itself. We can't move on until someone breaks the cycle." "How?" "The basement. There's something in the basement that anchors us here. We've tried to tell the others who lived here, but the house made them leave before they could help us." I thought about Sarah Chen's accident, about all the previous tenants who had fled after just weeks or months. How many people had the house driven away? How many had it killed? "Will you help us?" Margaret asked. "Please?" Looking at those ghostly figures, the children who had never had a chance to grow up, the young woman who had died far from home. I knew I couldn't turn away. Whatever was in this house had claimed too many lives already. "What's in the basement?" I asked. "See for yourself," Margaret whispered as the spirits began to fade. "But be careful. The house knows what you're planning now. It won't let you succeed easily." As if responding to her words, every door in the house slammed shut simultaneously, the sound echoing through the Victorian like gunshots. The lights flickered and went out, plunging me into darkness. Then, from somewhere deep below, I heard a sound that made my soul shrivel, a low, inhuman growling that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. The house was awake, and it was angry. I spent the rest of that night huddled in the living room, with every light I could find blazing around me. The house seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, doors opening and slamming shut on their own, objects flying across rooms, and always that terrible growling sound emanating from somewhere beneath my feet. By dawn, the phenomena had subsided enough for me to think clearly. I needed to get into the basement, but I also needed backup. If something happened to me, someone should know where I'd gone. I called my sister Emma, the only family member who still spoke to me after the divorce. "You sound terrible," she said after I'd given her a heavily edited version of what was happening. "Maybe you should just move out. Find somewhere else." "I can't," I said, and I realized I meant it, whether it was conscience, stubbornness, or something else entirely. I couldn't abandon the spirits trapped in this house. "I have to finish this." "Finish what?" "You're talking like someone in a horror movie. Just pack up and leave." But I'd already made my decision. "Emma, if something happens to me, if I don't call you by tomorrow morning, send the police to 124/7 Millbrook Lane. Tell them to check the basement. Don't you dare hang up on me." I ended the call and turned off my phone. I couldn't afford distractions now. The basement door was located off the kitchen, hidden behind what I'd assumed was a pantry. It was locked, but Margaret's journal had provided the location of a spare key, taped under the kitchen sink. My hands shook as I unlocked the door and stared down into the darkness below. The stairs creaked ominously under my weight as I descended, flashlight beam dancing ahead of me. The basement was larger than I'd expected, with a low ceiling supported by thick wooden beams. The air smelled of mold and something else, something sweet and rotten that made my stomach turn. As I swept the flashlight around the space, I understood why the house felt so malevolent. The walls were covered in symbols, not painted, but carved deep into the wood and stone. They weren't any language I recognized, but they seemed to writhe and shift in the flashlight beam, making my eyes water when I looked directly at them. In the center of the basement sat an old wooden table, its surface stained dark with what I desperately hoped wasn't blood. Arranged around it were personal belongings, photographs, jewelry, children's toys, and what looked like locks of hair tied with ribbon, trophies from the house's victims. But it was what lay beneath the table that made me understand the true horror of this place. The floorboards had been removed, revealing bare earth that had been dug up and hastily refilled. As I knelt and brushed away the loose soil, my flashlight illuminated something that made me recoil in terror. Bones, human bones, small and yellowed with age. The Whitmore children hadn't died from carbon monoxide poisoning. They'd been murdered, buried in the basement, and the house had been feeding on their trapped souls ever since. Every subsequent death, Margaret's accident, Sarah Chen's fall, all the others who had died here over the years had only made it stronger. "You shouldn't have come down here." I spun around to find Mrs. Henley standing at the bottom of the stairs. But something was wrong with her appearance. Her skin was pale and translucent, and her eyes were completely black. "You're not Mrs. Henley," I said, backing away from her. "Mrs. Henley died 15 years ago," the thing wearing her face replied. "I've been using her form to lure new residents here. You were supposed to join them quietly, like the others, but you had to interfere." The temperature plummeted as the entity dropped its human disguise. What stood before me now was something ancient and hungry, a writhing mass of shadows, with too many eyes and a mouth full of needle teeth. The symbols on the walls began to glow with a sickly green light. "This house has been my feeding ground for over a century," it hissed. "I will not let you take that away from me." The spirits of the house's victims materialized around me. Margaret, her children, Sarah Chen, and dozens of others I hadn't seen before. They formed a protective circle, their ghostly forms growing brighter as the entity grew more agitated. "You can't stop me," the creature snarled. "They belong to me now." "No," Margaret's voice rang out clear and strong. "We belong to ourselves. We always have." That's when I understood what needed to be done. The entity wasn't keeping them here through some mystical binding. It was feeding on their belief that they were trapped. Fear and despair were its sustenance, but hope and determination were its poison. I pulled out a lighter and began setting fire to the objects on the table. The photographs, the hair, all the trophies the entity had collected. As each item burned, the spirits grew brighter, and the creature shrieked in fury. "You're free," I shouted over its howls. "You've always been free. You just have to choose to leave." One by one, the spirits began to fade, not into shadow, but into light. The Whitmore children went first, their small hands clasped together as they smiled at me with gratitude. Sarah Chen paused to mouth "thank you" before dissolving into golden motes that drifted upward through the ceiling. Margaret was the last to go. "The house will try to rebuild what you've destroyed," she warned, "but it will be weaker now. Tell others what happened here. Don't let it claim any more victims." As she faded away, the entity let out one final, earth-shaking roar before collapsing in on itself. The symbols on the walls cracked and crumbled, and the oppressive atmosphere that had permeated the house for so long lifted like fog in morning sunlight. I climbed the stairs on shaking legs and walked out of that house for the last time. By morning, I'd driven 3 states away and checked into a motel room where I immediately called Emma to let her know I was safe. I never went back to collect my belongings. I didn't need anything from that place. The house still stands on Millbrook Lane, empty now for over a year. I've been in touch with the local authorities, and they've opened an investigation into the basement. They found the remains of at least 7 people buried beneath the foundation, including the Whitmore children. Mrs. Henley's body was discovered in her apartment across town. She died of natural causes 2 weeks before I first called about renting the house. The police are still trying to figure out who I actually spoke with on the phone. I've told my story to anyone who will listen, posting it on forums and local news websites. Most people think I'm crazy, but if it prevents even one person from renting that house, it's worth it. Sometimes, late at night, I still dream about those spirits finding their way to whatever comes after this life. I hope they're at peace now. I hope they're finally free. And sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I can hear Margaret's voice on the wind, whispering a single word: "Thank you." You pull into the gravel driveway just as the sun begins its descent behind the tree line, casting long shadows across the overgrown lawn. The Whitmore house stands before you like something from a Gothic novel. 3 stories of weathered Victorian architecture, complete with a wraparound porch and ornate gingerbread trim that's seen better decades. The rental listing photos hadn't quite captured the house's imposing presence, or perhaps the fading light is playing tricks on your eyes. The rent was too good to pass up, especially for someone in your financial situation, fresh out of college with student loans breathing down your neck. You jumped at the chance to rent this entire house for less than what most people pay for a studio apartment. The elderly landlord, Mr. Henley, had been surprisingly eager to find a tenant, barely asking any questions during your brief phone interview. "Just keep the place clean and pay on time," he'd said in his gravelly voice. "House has been empty too long." You grab your first box from the car, noting how the front steps creak ominously under your weight. The brass key Mr. Henley provided turns easily in the ornate lock, and the heavy front door swings open with a prolonged groan that echoes through the empty interior. The smell hits you immediately, not the musty odor you'd expected from a house that had sat vacant, but something else, something sweet and cloying, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. As you make trip after trip from your car, bringing in boxes and furniture, you can't shake the feeling of being watched. It's probably just the adjustment period, you tell yourself. Moving into a new place always feels strange at first, but as evening deepens into night, that sensation only grows stronger. The hardwood floors stretch before you, leading to a grand staircase that curves upward into shadow. Your footsteps echo hollowly as you explore the first floor, flipping light switches and mentally cataloging the rooms. The kitchen is spacious but dated, with cast iron fixtures and a massive farmhouse sink. The living room boasts a beautiful stone fireplace, though dark stains around the hearth suggest it hasn't been properly maintained. Built-in bookshelves line the walls, still holding scattered volumes left behind by previous tenants. The electricity works, thankfully, though several bulbs have burned out, leaving pockets of deep shadow throughout the house. You make a mental note to buy replacements tomorrow. For tonight, you focus on setting up your bedroom on the second floor, a spacious room with tall windows that overlook the backyard, or what you assume is the backyard. It's too dark now to see much beyond the glass. The third floor is smaller than the others, with sloped ceilings that follow the roofline. Your flashlight beam reveals dust motes dancing in the air and old furniture covered with white sheets. The creaking has stopped. In the silence, you sweep your light across the room, illuminating ghostly shapes, a dresser, a small table, and yes, a rocking chair positioned near a circular window. You grab a flashlight from your moving supplies and head for the stairs. The second-floor hallway stretches before you, with doors leading to what appear to be additional bedrooms and a bathroom. At the far end, another staircase leads upward. The creaking continues as you climb, growing louder with each step. Around midnight, as you're unpacking your clothes, you hear it for the first time, a soft rhythmic creaking from somewhere above, the third floor. You pause, listening intently. The sound comes in regular intervals, like someone slowly rocking in a chair. But you haven't been to the third floor yet, and Mr. Henley assured you the house would be completely empty. The chair sits perfectly still. The rational part of your mind supplies a dozen explanations. The old house settling, temperature changes causing the wood to expand and contract, maybe even mice or squirrels in the walls. Old houses make all sorts of noises. You're just tired and on edge in a new environment. You approach cautiously, your flashlight beam steady on the chair. It's an antique piece, with intricate carved details and worn cushions. There's no breeze up here that could have caused it to move. No explanation for the rhythmic sound you heard. You reach out and give the chair a gentle push. It rocks forward and back with the exact same creaking sound, that drew you upstairs. Sleep doesn't come easily that first night. Every creak and settling sound of the old house makes you tense. But eventually, exhaustion wins, and you drift off to an uneasy sleep, telling yourself that tomorrow everything will look different in the daylight. But as you turn to leave, you notice something that makes your blood run cold. In the dust on the floor around the rocking chair, there are small impressions, the kind left by someone's feet resting there while they rock. The dust is thick everywhere else, undisturbed for months or even years. But around the chair, it's been disturbed recently, very recently. You back away from the chair, your flashlight beam wavering slightly as your hand trembles. The sound of your own heartbeat seems deafeningly loud in the silence. You take the stairs 2 at a time, not bothering to look back, and return to your bedroom where you close and lock the door behind you. You're wrong. Morning brings little comfort. Sunlight streaming through the tall windows reveals that the Whitmore house is even more imposing in daylight, its Victorian details casting intricate shadows across the walls. You make coffee in the ancient kitchen, the pipes groaning as water flows through them, and try to rationalize the previous night's experience. By noon, you've almost convinced yourself it was just new house jitters. You spend the day unpacking and arranging furniture, gradually making the space feel more like home. The house is actually quite beautiful once you get past its intimidating exterior. The original hardwood floors, despite their age, gleam when cleaned. The ornate moldings and vintage fixtures give each room character that modern apartments lack. It's while you're organizing books in the living room that you find the journal. It's wedged between 2 volumes of poetry on one of the built-in shelves. A slim leather-bound book with no title on the cover. You almost miss it entirely. But something about its placement, pushed back further than the other books, catches your attention. When you pull it free, you notice your hands are trembling slightly. The first entry is dated 3 months ago. March 20th. Strange sounds at night. Probably just the house settling, but it's keeping me awake. Sounds like footsteps in the attic. March 15th. Moved into the Whitmore house today. Beautiful place. Can't believe the rent is so low. The landlord seemed eager to get someone in here. Can't say I blame him. It's been empty for almost 2 years according to the neighbors. Your stomach drops. Someone else lived here recently. Someone who presumably left in a hurry since they forgot their journal. You flip through more entries. March 30th. The smell is getting worse. Sweet, sickly smell that comes and goes. Strongest near the fireplace. Checked for dead animals, but found nothing. March 24th. Found the rocking chair on the 3rd floor. Swear it was in a different position than yesterday. Making a note to ask the landlord about previous tenants. Your hands are shaking now as you read. Each entry describes experiences that mirror your own, escalating over the weeks. April 12th. The rocking chair was moving. When I went upstairs tonight, actually moving. I stood there and watched it rock back and forth for 5 minutes before it stopped. I can't stay here. April 18th. Packed everything today. Can't reach the landlord to give notice. But I don't care about the deposit. Something is very wrong with this house. The woman in white. I've seen her 3 times now. She watches from the windows. I think she's been here all along. April 5th. Saw a figure in the backyard last night. Tall, wearing what looked like a long dress. When I looked again, nothing there. Need to get better locks. The final entry is brief and hurried. April 19th. She was in my room last night, standing at the foot of my bed. I could smell that awful sweet smell like rotting lilies, getting out today. If someone else rents this place, I hope they find this journal. Don't stay. Whatever you do, don't stay. You sink into the wingback chair you'd positioned near the fireplace, the journal heavy in your hands. The previous tenant's experiences match yours so closely it's impossible to dismiss as coincidence. The rocking chair, the sweet smell, the sense of being watched, it's all here, documented in increasingly frantic handwriting. She's tall and pale, wearing a high-necked white dress with intricate lace details. Her dark hair is pulled back severely, and her eyes seem to follow you as you study the photograph. Even in the aged image, there's something unsettling about her expression. Not quite a smile, but not entirely serious either. Something knowing and cold. The mantelpiece holds several framed photographs that you hadn't noticed before, or perhaps they weren't there yesterday. The frames are tarnished silver, and the photographs inside are old, sepia-toned portraits of a stern-looking Victorian family. But it's the woman in the center that makes you gasp. As if summoned by your thoughts, you catch a whiff of that sickly sweet scent. It's faint but unmistakable, seeming to emanate from the fireplace. You approach cautiously, journal still clutched in your hand. The smell grows stronger as you near the hearth. Those dark stains you'd noticed yesterday look more ominous now, and you realize they're not just soot and ash. The journal falls from your numb fingers as you realize what you're hearing. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps pacing back and forth across the attic floor. As you stand frozen in the living room, you can track the movement by sound alone, from the circular window to the far wall and back again, over and over. You're so absorbed in studying the photograph that you almost miss the sound. A soft thud from upstairs, like something heavy being moved. Then another, and another, regular rhythmic sounds coming from the third floor. Every rational thought tells you to leave, get in your car, drive away, and never look back. But you've signed a lease, paid first and last month's rent, and moved your entire life here. Where would you go? How would you explain to friends and family that you fled from a house because of some creaking floorboards and an abandoned journal? The footsteps stop. The humming grows fainter, as if the woman is moving away from the stairs, deeper into the third floor. You know you should run, but instead you find yourself drawn upward. You need to see, you need to know what's sharing this house with you. In the sudden silence, you can hear your own ragged breathing and the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Then, drifting down from above, comes a sound that makes your blood freeze, humming. A woman's voice, soft and melodious, humming a tune you don't recognize. Something old and mournful, like a lullaby from another century.